Jeff, great to be back on the radio with Pat McCarthy, who was our Iron Pigs guy that ain't going to be our Iron Pigs guy no more. Pat McCarthy, you got a new gig now. You're busy.
Yeah, it's first of all, it's great to talk to you guys. I always love when we get a chance to talk right before spring training, but it's yeah, it's to be a little bit different now. Not getting a chance to talk pigs like we have in years past, but still excited for to talk a little New York Mets and NL East baseball.
All right. Well, before we get to the big leagues stuff, tell us a little bit about your Iron Pigs days and what you'll remember most about your time down there.
Oh man, just from a personal perspective, so much, right? So 2018, I go to Lehigh Valley for the first time, and I'm a 23-year-old kid, and I'm a year and a half out of college, and just I grew so much, not just as a person, but as a broadcaster in my time in Lehigh Valley. And, it's a time which is going to be really special for me just because, I had my then girlfriend, Emily, with me at the time, now my wife, and, how much personally I feel like I've grown since then, and, how much I've grown as a broadcaster. I mean, the Iron Pigs gave me an opportunity to eventually get to Philadelphia to call games at the big league level for the first time. And I made friendships up there and connections up there that I will have for the rest of my life. And without them, I don't know if I would have had the experiences that I have. I owe so much to them. And it was such a special time. And the years from 2018 to 2022 are going to be ones that I'll never forget, whether that was my first time in AAA or my first time going on the road full time, or dressing up like Winnie the Pooh and Shaggy when we have character drive-thrus during the canceled 2020 season, to, ultimately getting the chance to call Major League Baseball the first time in 2021 and then continuing that in 2022. So the Pigs are always going to have such a special place in my heart and allowed me to grow up.
You talk about friendships. So we have had the honor to spend time with you and Mike Ventola together and apart for years now. And one of the things that I've noticed, especially in watching the Super Bowl and seeing how Greg Olson works with his partner, is how important it is to have a good partner and to have a rapport. What was it like to work with Mike Ventola, and what are you looking forward to as you move forward with the Mets and how you're going to deal with them?
Sure. Mike, I'm going to get emotional talking about this one because Mike is more than a broadcast partner to me. He is one of my closest friends and a person that I wouldn't be here without him. Just truly, he gave me my first opportunity in Reading in 2017, and then eventually when we were partners in Lehigh Valley from 2019 on. And what made our relationship so special is that, we were as close as friends as you could get. So when Mike and I put on the headset together, what folks heard was just our everyday conversations. That's how we communicated with each other. And whether that was, him calling me his giant man child, or me making fun of, his love for MeTV and MASH, like that's just our interactions. That's how we communicated with each other. And, Mike and I, during the off season, we talked as close to every day as physically possible. I mean, I was actually just thinking about it when I was coming back in the car just now, that I hadn't spoken to Mike in about 3 days since we've both taken on new jobs. And that was a little weird for me, especially at this time of the year, just because we talk all the time. So it'll be very weird for me that it's the first time since 2019, and it'll only be the second season of me working in professional baseball that I won't have Mike as partner. And we've been through a lot together. We're going to continue to go through a lot together. And, we got to celebrate with my wedding in October. And I think that was a really nice kind of like cap off for both of us. Was, we don't really get a chance to interact outside of baseball that much, just because he lives in the Lehigh Valley and I live here in New Jersey. So, we don't really see each other that often away from the ballpark. So that was special for us. And it was special for me and Emily to have him there, because he's meant so much to her as well. We were seniors and juniors in high school, or in college, I should say, when we first met Mike, and then to where we are now in our relationship. And he's been a part of that the entire way. So Mike means so much to me as a partner, but more importantly as a friend, because he's allowed me to grow as a person as much as a broadcaster. And I'm going to go on to New York and work with two incredible partners, and the future Mets Hall of Famer and Howie Rose, and And, Keith Rad, who's joining the broadcast with, alongside with me this year, who, the two of us at 29 and 27 or 30 and 28 that we're going to be when the season starts, we have an opportunity to bring a new, young, fresh perspective to the broadcast. And then we're going to pair that with an absolute legend in Howie Rose. And it's going to be a really special time in the Mets broadcast booth, and for me, the things I'm most excited about it is watching Howie go about his business every single day. He's been doing it for so long and he's been doing it at such a high level. So, on the days where I'm doing pre and post and I'm just kind of sitting back and watching him and Keith call a game, I'm going to learn so much during that time, and then use that in the time when Keith and I on the broadcast, and it's going to be a fun season.
You talk about watching Howie, and as you're about to realize your broadcast dream, I want to take you back even further. I want to hear about the 16th birthday present that you had, where you took a plane flight your first time on the team charter, getting to hang out with some players, and how that made you realize what you wanted to do and play that forward to today and where you are now.
Sure. Yeah. So I've always talked about that as kind of being my aha moment of when I really recognized how incredible of an opportunity it was. I'd always wanted to go to Wrigley Field. That was always my dream. And I finally got that opportunity when I was 16. And I can just remember watching guys walk back and forth on the charter and just being in such awe of them. And when you're an 8, 9, 10, 16-year-old kid, doesn't matter how old you are, these guys are larger than life. They are everything. So, to get a chance to watch them and then to go to Wrigley Field and watch Roy Halladay pitch in that game was really cool. And for me, I think that's when I really started to put into perspective of how incredible this opportunity would be moving forward. And from there, that's when that itch eventually became a fire. And now I'm fortunate to get to do it for a living.
You talked about that you're about to be able to learn from Howie Rose. You've learned from one of the best in your dad. What has the influence of your dad been on this career?
Just everything. Yeah, he has worked so hard to get himself to where he is, and I've learned so much just by watching him through the years. And we talk about broadcasting a lot, we do, but it's not what consumes our conversations. I mean, we talk about so much more about life, and I learned so much more from him as a father, as a husband, as a person than I do as a broadcaster. I just listen, I just watch when he's calling games, and he's really good about kind of taking a step back at times in terms of being constructive in terms of broadcast. Like, obviously he gives me tidbits and he listens and he gives me ways to improve, but our relationship is so much bigger than that I feel like I learned so much more from him away from the microphone, and so much of what I learned from him away from the microphone I take onto the microphone, and that's what I use as part of my broadcast every single day. So I've been so blessed, I've been so fortunate to have him as a role model and as somebody that I emulate and strive to be every single day, that I tell people all the time, if I can be 5% of the man that he is, I will just be the luckiest person in the entire world, because he has set the standard so high for me. So I strive every single day to be that person and continue to meet the standard that he has set every single day.
Well, when you listen to you both call a game, you don't just call a game, you learn while you're listening to call a game. And we're researching for this interview, and I saw you wanted to be a marine biologist, I believe.
Yeah.
Your friend convinced you that wasn't going to work, but you went the history route. And I'm curious how baseball is sort of like teaching people history in your call, and how you've incorporated those passions together for yourself.
Yeah. I remember having a conversation with somebody about that. One of my first years in Lehigh Valley is that I never realized how closely connected they are. And, I love to know things. I hate not knowing things. And I love to read, and I love to watch, YouTube videos on different things. And I love to listen to podcasts. And I love to just immerse myself with knowledge of whatever. I always joke with people that I take pride in trying to know everything about everything that nobody cares about, because at any point that information could be really important in a broadcast. And I can remember it was 2019. It was a doubleheader in Indianapolis, and it was just the longest doubleheader of all time. And I started diving into a history lesson of the most famous people from Indianapolis. And it was, who was listening at that point? I have no idea, but I owed it to them to talk about something outside of just what was happening in this 15-2 game 2 of a doubleheader at 11 o'clock at night. So you start to realize that all of this information that you take in, somewhere down the line, it's going to be important. And whether I'm doing a history lesson on Charles de Gaulle's revolutionary ways of leading the French back from oppression during World War II, or if I'm telling people about why Justin Verlander is throwing this pitch there, or how he developed that, it's all the same thing. It's the same concept. So I try to use that passion as a way to immerse myself in different fields. I'm reading a book right now on the 1986 Mets, just to make sure that I have everything I need to know about Mets history. And because to me, there's nothing worse than going into a conversation and telling people you have an interest in something and then asking you about it. And you're like, I actually don't know. And so, I remember having a conversation with somebody. They're asking who my top 5 presidents were of all time, my favorite presidents, not just best, like guys that I enjoyed. And I said Ronald Reagan was one of them. And he asked me why. I'm like, I don't know. So I went and I read a biography on Ronald Reagan. Like I just need to constantly have things in my back pocket that I can use. And whether that's as a broadcaster or as a history teacher, it's the same thing.
So how long is it going to be before you work Charles de Gaulle into one of your broadcasts?
I'll have to see. I have to make sure that it fits in the right way. I can mix in Churchill if we need to. I can, I can. I'm a huge World War II buff, and my college thesis was on the impact that film noir had on the reconstruction of post-war Europe. So that's where I really had to dive into.
So you're ready for rain delays.
Oh yeah. If you want to have a conversation of why Orson Welles portrayed himself in The Third Man and in the role of Harry Lime, I'm all there for you. I'd be happy to have that conversation with you at any time during a rain delay.
All right. Well, Pat, if you're looking for some history on 1986 Mets, you have to, if you have not watched it, watch Once Upon a Time in Queens.
I've heard that there's a ton of great documentaries on it. This book's been fantastic so far. I've learned so much just about the dynamic in that clubhouse. It was pretty incredible. I had read Keith Hernandez's autobiography back in 2019. And he spoke a lot about the 86 Mets, but I had no idea that the cast of characters that were in that clubhouse at the time. It's been really fun to listen to.
We had Ed Hearn, who was the backup catcher on that team, on, and we asked him, how did that Mets team not win more World Series? And he said, no, the question you should be asking is how they won one World Series, considering how dysfunctional they were. You are, I think, transitioning from the minors to the majors at a time that you're going to be able to explain stuff to an audience that isn't going to understand it except for people who are real scene heads, in that you've watched some of the changes, some of the things that have happened in minor league baseball are now about to happen in Major League Baseball. Which of the minor league rules that are being implemented in the major leagues this year do you think you're going to be spending the most time trying to explain?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm just going to base it off of the conversations that I felt like I was explaining more than anything is during last year, was when we first started implementing these at the minor league level. I think the pickoff rule is going to take a lot of time for people to get used to. When the clock starts versus when it doesn't start. How is Major League Baseball going to enforce these legal pitches? And what is an illegal pitch? What is a legal pitch? I think, to me, those are going to be the ones that are going to be take the longest to get used to. I think the shift, it's pretty cut and dry. 2 infielders on each side, feet have to be on the dirt. That's pretty much it. I think the pickoff rules, when I've had conversations with folks in the big leagues last year, was walking through everything of what you can do in this pickoff situation. When does it reset? Because we had confusions within the minors last year. Guys didn't realize that if they were called for third disengagement, it doesn't reset like that. It's not just, it's not like, oh, okay, I've used my third. All right, no problem. I can step off again. No, it's another balk. And we had it last year where guys stepped off a third time, got called for a balk, stepped off a fourth time, got called for a balk again, and didn't necessarily know why they were being called for a balk. So I think for me, those are going to be the ones that I'm going to have to kind of use as our, when we are talking about these rule changes and how we saw them at the minor league level. And that's where, for us in the Mets booth, that's where it's going to be really important, is that Keith and I both experienced it. And Keith was in high A with Brooklyn, where they even had more rules than we had in AAA. So he'll be able to help us out, having seen the whole scope of things. And I'm excited for it. I mean, you guys know me. You guys know that I'm kind of a traditional baseball kind of guy. Like, I like the game how it is, and I've hated every rule implementation when it's happened. And I can honestly tell you that as I watched the game at the minor league level, it has improved the game dramatically. I think that there's ways that it needs to be refined, but I was never a fan of the placed runner when it happened. I love the placed runner now. I think it does it adds so much suspense to extra innings. I think it's awesome. I was totally against the pitch clock. Having seen the pitch clock last year used in a way where it was enforced to the rule that Major League and Minor League Baseball had intended it to, it dramatically changed the pace of the game. And I loved it. And I thought it was awesome. So I think as guys get used to it, it's going to really help the game.
I enjoy watching people's reactions so far to things. I think Alex Cora said the bigger bases look like pizza boxes. So
I heard that. I will say, they looked a lot larger in the photos than I remembered them being last year. We had them in AAA.
Everybody joked around about it, like, oh, an inch here, an inch. They look significantly bigger, and you wonder, like, I'm actually curious if you're going to have any more injuries in terms of that, because the distances people go, they've timed their runs out from the plate to stride and hit right on the base at a certain time.
Yep.
Like, you're going to have certain changes, and you talk about your co-host having called A-ball. He says he's seen robo-umps down there and the introduction of that into the game. So Jeff's right. You guys are going to be on the forefront of a lot of changes in the way that baseball is played, which is going to require you as the broadcaster to make sure we understand what's going on. I don't understand when the clock resets or the balk rule. But you only get 2 throwovers now before a balk, and most people don't understand that. They're used to booing after the third one because it's delaying the game. So as a broadcaster, what kind of responsibility is that for you to know that you could have people that have watched the game forever that may not know the way this game this year is going to be called?
Yeah, and there's a lot of nuances to the rule, right? Like, it's not just throwovers, it's step-offs, it's timeouts called by the catcher. It's all these different things. Hitters not being able to step out of the box as much. Like, there's going to be all these different rules that we are going to need to go over, and we're going to have to pay close attention to, because there were times last year where I might lose track of something and not realize that an auto ball was called or an auto strike was called. And in a big league game, that's huge. The implications of it are massive. And I think early on, I'm interested to see how Major League Baseball is going to enforce it. And how are guys going to adjust? And we owe it to those listening, especially on the radio. And in New York, radio is king. A lot of people are listening to these games on the radio where they don't necessarily see the count change on the TV. We have to make sure that they know, hey, an auto ball has been called here. Ooh, an auto strike has been called here. Here's why. Because in the minor leagues, eventually it was just auto ball called, auto strike called. And we didn't really have to get into it that much. We are going to have to explain, here's reasons X, Y, Z, why an auto ball was called here or why an auto strike was called here.
Well, one thing you're not going to have to explain is the Mets-Phillies rivalry. We are in a time where Mets fans have always hated Phillies fans have always hated Mets fans, but it never seemed like they were both good at the same time. You've now gotten to see the young players come up, contribute, make this Phillies team a team that went to the World Series this past year, and now you're going to be on the other side of that equation. How much fun is it going to be, not only to be calling what now looks like a real rivalry, but calling it while your father is going to be in the booth on the other side of the park?
Yeah, it's going to be really special. really special. And for me, it goes back to my early days of being a baseball fan in, let's say 2006, 2007, 2008, when the Phillies and Mets for that 3-year period were super intense in terms of how they were playing each other. But for the last decade or so, it really hasn't been that thing, but just because the Phillies haven't been very good during that time. The Mets made the run to the World Series in 15, but otherwise they hadn't reached the playoffs until last year. We're talking about 3 teams right now in the National League East that all could contend for a World Series championship. And all 3 made it to the playoffs last year. And I don't see any reason why all 3 won't make it to the playoffs again this year. The Braves only got better. The Mets, even with losing Jacob deGrom, only got better. The Phillies got better. They added Trey Turner. And it's like we are at a time in National League East baseball where all 3 of the top level teams in the division are going to contend for a World Series title this year. September and October is going to be a lot of fun. And I feel like I've jumped on the bandwagon here, joining this Mets broadcast team at this time. But it's going to be a wild fall. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think these 3 teams are going to push each other until the very end.
Looking at the Mets team, you mentioned that they lost Jacob deGrom. People sit there and go, how can you replace a pitcher that is that good? Is the Mets rotation going to be just as good this year from what you think?
I think it's better. Yeah, I think, watching Jacob deGrom from the outside over the last 2-3 years, he hasn't really been on the mound consistently. And that's really been, the hardest thing. And the news comes out earlier today that he's already experiencing some discomfort down in Arizona. So I think this Mets rotation is better than it was last season. I mean, you think about how good Tyler McGill was last year, and he is now just kind of an extra guy in this rotation. When you look at the 5 starters, Kodai Senga, what is he going to be when this translates over? But he was a marquee international free agent signing to come on over here from Japan. So, if Verlander and Scherzer are healthy, they're 2 of the top echelon pitchers in Major League Baseball. 2 guys that are going to be first ballot Hall of Famers. And, we're talking about a 40-year-old pitcher coming off a Cy Young Award where he looked like he was still the Justin Verlander of, his early days in Detroit. And I think if Scherzer can stay healthy, he's the same type of pitcher. And then, they add a guy like Jose Quintana as like an extra arm. So, and then Carlos Carrasco had a really nice stretch run in August and September. So I think you have the 5 starters, and then you pair that with guys like David Peterson and Tyler McGill, who can kind of mix and match into that rotation to spell guys here or there. I think the Mets rotation, even with losing Jacob deGrom, is a much better rotation than it was last season.
We've talked about it in the past. You not only call games, you played the game. Do you still, when you get to this time of year, you get to spring training, do you still wish you were out there?
I'll always feel that way, I think, because I had such an incredible experience in college. And I had a group of guys that, to this day, of the 8 groomsmen that I had in my wedding, 5 of which were my teammates from college. And I'll include my brother in that as well, because my brother was a teammate of mine in college. But, either way. So I had an incredible group of guys that I played with that I would do anything to be able to go down to Florida with them for another spring break to play baseball together. So I will always have that itch because of the experience that I had, and to put the pants on one more time and lace up the spikes. And I think about all the time just to play catch, have a meaningful game of catch where, hey, I'm working on this, I'm working on that. I would do anything for just one more chance to do that.
Well, in the meantime, we are thrilled that you got your call up to the bigs, that you get to do this now all the time. We're honored that we got to be a part of your journey a little bit along the way, and hopefully during the season we'll get you and your dad back on when the Mets play the Phillies and chop it up a little with you together, having a good time. Pat, congratulations, awesome. Man. We're very happy for you.
No, thank you. You guys have always been great throughout the years, and it's been a fun ride, and looking to continue it.